You think of your ancestors as primitive survivors who fought off wild beasts with stone axes. You imagine a brutal daily war against a hostile wilderness where only the strongest could survive. You see yourself as the pinnacle of evolutionary success because your branch of the family tree is the only one left standing. What if you have been lied to your entire life? Your body is actually the descendant of a weaker, more fragile lineage. You did not conquer the planet through physical dominance or individual genius. How did you end up here while your much stronger cousins vanished forever? Look closely at your own reflection. Your skull is thin, your bones are light, and your jaw is remarkably small. If you were to stand next to a Neanderthal, you would instantly feel an overwhelming sense of physical inferiority. Their chests were broad, barrel-like cages built to retain heat in the frozen tundra. Their muscle mass was immense, requiring up to 4,000 calories every single day just to maintain itself. They possessed dense, heavy bones that could withstand the impact of wrestling a woolly mammoth to the ground. Why did an organism so perfectly engineered for survival simply fade into the shadows? The answer is not found in a grand prehistoric war. For a long time, popular culture insisted that your ancestors marched out of Africa and systematically slaughtered every other human species they encountered. It is a dramatic narrative that satisfies our modern appetite for conflict. The archaeological record tells a completely different story. At sites like Shanidar Cave in modern-day Iraq, researchers have unearthed Neanderthal remains that reveal a deeply compassionate society. One famous skeleton, known to anthropologists as Shanidar I, belonged to an individual who suffered massive trauma early in life. He survived for decades despite being blind in one eye, missing a lower arm, and suffering from a severe limp. How could a supposedly brutal brute survive such debilitating injuries in a harsh world? He survived because his community cared for him. They carried his burdens, shared their food, and protected him when he was vulnerable. This was not a species of mindless killers. At the site of La Chapelle-aux-Saints in France, scientists discovered an elderly Neanderthal buried with deliberate care, surrounded by stone tools and animal bones. These people had a culture, a concept of death, and a profound sense of empathy. They were not wiped out by an invading army of your ancestors. If there was no Great War, what actually happened to them? The truth is far more subtle and devastating. It was a slow, quiet displacement driven by something you use every single day without thinking. Your ancestors possessed a unique cognitive mutation that transformed how they interacted with the world. Professor Robin Dunbar at the University of Oxford famously pioneered research into social group sizes among primates, leading to what we now call Dunbar's number. This principle suggests that the size of a species' neocortex directly limits the number of stable social relationships an individual can maintain. For modern humans, that number is roughly 150. For Neanderthals, evidence suggests their social circles were much smaller, rarely exceeding 30 individuals. Why does this tiny statistical difference matter so much? A small group is incredibly vulnerable to the whims of nature. If a single hunter is injured in a group of 30, the entire community faces immediate starvation. If a disease sweeps through a small family band, an entire regional population can vanish overnight. Your ancestors solved this fatal flaw by inventing the concept of extended networks. They did not just live in their immediate tribe. They formed alliances, traded goods across vast distances, and maintained relationships with people they might only see once a year. Consider the physical evidence left behind in the soil. When archaeologists excavate Neanderthal sites, they almost exclusively find stone tools made from local rocks gathered within a few miles of the cave. They lived entirely within their immediate geography. When researchers look at your ancestors' camps from the same era, they find exotic seashells, rare flint, and decorative pigments sourced from hundreds of miles away. Your ancestors were trading. They were talking. They were building a massive web of human connection that spanned continents. What happens when two different species compete for the same resources with such different social structures? Picture a brutal winter 50,000 years ago in the heart of Europe. The glaciers are advancing, and the herds of reindeer are growing scarce. A group of Neanderthals occupies a prime valley, relying on their incredible physical strength to ambush game at close range. They are masters of their environment, but they are entirely alone. A few miles away, a band of your ancestors moves into the same region. They are physically weaker, and they struggle to bring down large animals with basic spears. They have a secret weapon that changes the rules of the game entirely. They can call for help. When the winter becomes unbearable, your ancestors do not just rely on their immediate family. They use their trading networks to coordinate with distant tribes. They exchange information about where the animal herds are moving. They share food surpluses from regions that were not hit as hard by the weather. They form large hunting parties that combine the manpower of multiple bands. The Neanderthals, locked in their small, isolated groups, are slowly squeezed out of the best hunting grounds not by violence, but by sheer numbers and superior logistics. There is another hidden element to this prehistoric rivalry. At the site of Predmosty in the Czech Republic, researchers like Dr. Miche Germonpré have identified unusual canine remains alongside human settlements. These were not wild wolves. These were the earliest ancestors of the domestic dog. Your ancestors did something the Neanderthals never managed to do. They formed a cross-species alliance with an apex predator. How did this partnership alter the balance of power? A dog can run faster than any human. A dog can track an injured mammoth through miles of blinding snow. A dog can guard a camp while the humans sleep, saving precious energy that would otherwise be spent on sentry duty. By domesticating the wolf, your ancestors effectively outsourced their sensory perception and their hunting speed. The Neanderthals continued to hunt using raw muscle power, getting up close and personal with dangerous prey, sustaining terrible injuries. Your ancestors sat back, let their canine partners track the target, and used projectile weapons to kill from a safe distance. It was an unfair evolutionary advantage. The decline of the Neanderthal was not a sudden cataclysm. It was a gradual fading that took thousands of years. As your ancestors multiplied and filled the landscape, the spaces between Neanderthal groups grew larger. They became islands in a sea of modern humans. Over generations, their genetic diversity plummeted. When populations shrink below a certain threshold, harmful genetic mutations begin to accumulate, reducing fertility and weakening the species from within. They were not conquered. They were simply diluted and outpaced. Now consider a counterintuitive twist that challenges everything you think you know about extinction. The Neanderthals never actually disappeared completely. If you trace your ancestry to any region outside of sub-Saharan Africa, your own genome contains between 1 and 2% Neanderthal DNA. Your ancestors did not just compete with them. They looked at them, recognized them as fellow human beings, and had children with them. The genes you carry today for your immune system's response to viruses, the structure of your skin, and even your sleep patterns were inherited from those very same Ice Age survivors. They did not die out. They were absorbed into you. Look at your modern life through this ancient lens. You live in a world of hyperconnectivity where you can send a message to the other side of the planet in a fraction of a second. You belong to global networks, work in massive corporations, and navigate cities inhabited by millions of strangers. Your ancient social superpower has constructed a digital civilization of unprecedented scale. Are you actually happy in this massive web of connection? Your brain is still hardwired for that ancient threshold of 150 people. When you scroll through thousands of social media profiles, your evolutionary programming struggles to cope with the noise. You feel lonely in a crowded room because your biology craves the deep, intimate bond of the small family group that defined the Neanderthal existence. We traded the quiet safety of the small tribe for the chaotic power of the global network. You survived because your ancestors chose friendship and logistics over isolation. You think of your ancestors as primitive survivors who fought off wild beasts with stone axes. You view them as simple creatures who lucked into dominance through violence and luck. Look around at the world you have built with your cell phones, your internet, and your global alliances. You are only here because your fragile ancestors realized that the ultimate survival tool was not a sharper spear, but the person standing next to them. If you ever forget how to cooperate, you might find out just how fragile